Please be seated. The Secretary will read the order.
Debate on vote number 28, Labour Appropriation Bill.
I now call upon the Honourable the Minister of Labour to introduce the budget vote. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair, Honourable Deputy Minister of Labour, Honourable Acting Chairperson of the Portfolio Committees, leaders of our social partners, esteemed guests in the gallery, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly an honor for me to stand before you this morning to present the Department of Labour's budget vote 2018-19 financial year. It is significant that we present our budget in a year when we celebrate the life and times of our struggle icons, Ma Albertina Sisulu, and our international icon, the former president and the late Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. We are also gathered here in the Africa Month, where we recall the seminal writing of Priksliga Isaka Seme in 1906 with his prophetic essay, and I quote, "The Regeneration of Africa," close quote. We also recall that it was this very essay which later went on to inspire leaders like President Kwame Nkrumah, President Julius Nyerere, and Kenneth Kaunda to pursue the ideal of a free and united Africa. We also stand before you in the month when we celebrate the struggles of our workers around the world who fought tirelessly for an 8-hour day, resulting in May Day being declared an International Workers' Day. Sadly, we are also delivering our budget vote barely a month after we witnessed the passing of our struggle stalwarts, the mother of the nation, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Comrade Zola Skweyiya, and the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Comrade Fezeka Loliwe. We say, rest in power, Maqabo Mzabalazo Nkululeko. We will never forget your invaluable contribution, Nilale Ngoxolo. Honorable Chairperson, you will pardon me if I do not dwell too much on the details of how far we have gone, as such details are captured in our annual reports, strategic plans, and annual performance plans. However, the Deputy Minister will cover some aspects of progress to date and our key priorities going forward. Chairperson, let me start off by giving a broad brush synopsis on how far we have come in pursuit of the 2014 to 2019 MTSF as our blueprint and the ANC electoral mandate. We must underscore that in giving effect to this mandate, we continue to be guided by our constitutional commitments, the Freedom Charter, and the 2014 ANC election manifesto. We understand that this juncture of our democratic transitions call for bold and decisive steps to place the country on a path that seeks to eliminate poverty, creates jobs, and sustainable livelihoods for our people. This requires radical change and a sustained focus on addressing the real issues, not just empty rhetoric. True to the African proverb that says, and I quote, "If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together," close quote. We have indeed carried out our work in collaboration with our social partners and our people in order to ensure that the outcomes are not short-term, but medium to long-term, and most importantly, sustainable. We have been relatively successful in dealing with key priority issues in the medium-term strategic framework of the ruling party. These include putting in place measures to reduce workplace conflict, improving collaboration between government, organized business, and organized labor, enhancing fairness in the workplace, and encouraging robust but mutually beneficial labor relations culture. Collective bargaining structures and dispute settlements mechanisms are constantly being strengthened. Strengthening inspection and enforcement has remained one of our main focus areas in this MTSF period. Whilst we have exceeded our set targets on the inspections, we have now turned our attention to strengthening enforcement by introducing enabling legislative instruments to navigate the inherent complexities in this work. And procedural and unprotected strikes levels have declined significantly in the last 3 years, and the proposed amendments to the Labour Relations Act will assist to sustain this welcome development. Whilst there is a clear evidence that we have made significant strides in pushing the key issues on the 2014 to 2019 MTSF plan, we recognize that there is some still way to go to complete this task. We will use the remaining months to the end of this administration as a final push to complete any of our unfinished tasks. Honorable Chair, at the risk of sounding like I'm bragging, the ANC has indeed delivered on the call in the Freedom Charter that says, and I quote, "There shall be a national minimum wage," close quote. To complete this work, Parliament is seized with considering the first ever national minimum wage bill to be introduced in South Africa. You will be pleased to know that this is the only policy demand in the Freedom Charter which remained outstanding to date. When it is finalized, we can gladly stand back and rightfully proclaim that mission accomplished. Honorable Chair, there are few issues that I need to deal with. The first relates to the fact that the number of people who have now access to services of the department has grown significantly since 1994. Secondly, the services offerings of the department has also increased manifold from what it used to be in the period pre-1994. It is true that our infrastructure has not kept up with the volumes of people that use our service offerings. As a result, this has inevitably compromised the quality of service delivery in some instances. For this reason, and guided by the MTSF, we have developed plans to ramp up our infrastructure and modernization of our service delivery platforms. The Unemployment Insurance Fund and the Compensation Fund are leading in this regard, given that they are the two entities that command the biggest share of the services that we provide. Both funds, in addition to employing more service-oriented personnel, have introduced sophisticated online systems to enhance better service delivery. We all recognize that keeping our service delivery platforms up to speed with the demand on our services will take time, but we will not take our foot off the pedal. The Public Employment Services has been extremely successful in registering work seekers and other related services. The focus and orientation will now concentrate more on ramping up the number of placements, as that is where the desired impact will come from. Inspection and enforcement services registered high levels of success on the inspections and follow-ups fronts. However, the focus going forward will direct more energy in the efforts to improve enforcement. With regard to enhancing employment opportunities, the Unemployment Insurance Fund will continue to work with the Department of Higher Education and Training through CETAs, Public Works on the expanded Public Works Program exit plans, and the TVETs on upskilling UIF beneficiaries. Our partnership with the IDC created over 29,000 jobs and saved 16,000 in the last 4 years, ending 31 March 2018. We will continue to partner with the IDC as we have again ring-fenced 5 billion rands for labor-intensive investment projects going forward. You will recall that last year I reported on the Compensation Fund and the SAICA partnership to train learners on medical and actuarial skills. I reported also that the first intake of 100 learners commenced their studies in different skills, disciplines, and these were 20 medical doctors, 20 nurses, 35 occupational therapists, 5 actuaries, 20 medical orthotics, and prosthetics. I'm happy to report that the partnership with SAICA is beginning to bear the desired results. All 100 of the 2017 intake progressed to the second level of the program. We are very proud to announce that 22 of the learners from this program are our guests this morning and are sitting in the gallery, and I will ask them to stand up so that the honorable members can see them. Thank you very much. We are aware of challenges in occupational health and safety environment, and it is precisely for this reason that Cabinet has approved the passage of the Occupational Health and Safety Amendment Bill to Parliament. Honorable Chair, our efforts to expedite the amendments on the Compensation of Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act have turned out to be more complex than we had initially thought. The public comments window and the engagement at NEDLAC generated high volumes of public comments on the bill, and this slowed down the process considerably. The bill is still going through government internal processes. The Unemployment Insurance Amendment Bill has also been delayed in part in order to accommodate the private members' bill and to complete the consideration of regulations. The bill is currently going through the parliamentary processes, and we anticipate that it will be finalized shortly. Now, let me turn to the policy matter that has occupied the hearts and minds of many South Africans these days. That is the proposed national minimum wage. There are those who have come out in support of this policy intervention, and there are equally those who for various reasons, are opposed to this intervention. I have said this before, and I want to once again underscore that whilst the introduction of the national minimum wage may not mean a lot to those who are well looked after in the world of work, for the majority of the vulnerable workers, it will be a huge difference. National minimum wage is by no means an end in itself, but a means to an end. Setting the inaugural level at 20 Rand per hour was informed by research and robust analysis of various scenarios and their possible ramifications. This level is informed by the real-world considerations and not some idealistic desires. It is also disturbing that those who are against the national minimum wage have nothing to offer as alternatives, but want to keep the status quo. Those who are demanding that the level be set higher are total oblivious of the consequences of doing so. It is ironic that whilst the legislators are busy doing shadow boxing on the national minimum wage, it is said that a number of progressive employers have already started adjusting their workers' wages in anticipation of the national minimum wage becoming a reality. It is also heartening that the employers in question are adjusting workers' wages upwards and not downwards, as others would want us to believe. Honorable Chair, another matter that has been exaggerated in the public domain relates to the proposed amendments to Section 95, 99, and 100 of the Labour Relations Act. This is with respect to requiring trade unions and employer organizations that seek registration to make provisions in their constitutions requiring a secret ballot of members before embarking on a strike or lockout, as the case may be. The impression that is created in the public discourse seeks to suggest that this provision in the LRA is new, which is not the case. Trade union constitutions have always made provisions to ballot their members. The only thing that is new in the introduction of the word secret, an obligation to keep the records for a certain period of time. It is intriguing to note that the Collins English Dictionary defines the word ballot as a secret vote in which select a stance or express their opinion about something. The Oxford English Dictionary defines the word ballot as a system of voting secretly and in writing on a particular issue. Introducing secret before the word ballot is therefore nothing new but an emphasis on the real meaning of the word and what is already implied in the existing law. This amendment is informed by our commitment to simplify the labor laws, honorable members. The second source of protest by certain people stems from the 4 proposed changes to Section 32 of the LRA and the rationale behind each one. The first is the extension of the period within which the minister must extend a collective agreement if the parties to the agreement are only sufficiently represented. This is to provide the minister with sufficient time to consider any commitments received in respect of the minister's notice published in terms of Section 32(5)(c) of the Act. The second is to provide for improved representativeness requirements for the extension of the collective agreements under Section 32(2) of the Act. Section 32(2) of the Act required the trade union party to the agreement to represent the majority of employees, and in addition, that the members of the employer organization party to the agreement be required to employ the majority of employees within the scope of the agreement. The amendment now only requires one or the other. In order to promote collective bargaining at sectoral level and in accordance with the jurisprudence of the ILO, the operating principle underlying the extension of agreements is either whether an agreement applies to the majority of employees in the sector or to the scope of application of the agreement. In other words, the principle is now one of coverage rather than strict representativeness. This is a major breakthrough for the labor movement and not an easy victory at all. The third is the manner in which representativeness is determined. The original intention of the Act was that representativeness of bargaining councils and their constituent parties will be determined annually by the registrar and not each and every time a bargaining council referred a collective agreement to the Minister for Extension. The amendments to both Section 32(2)(c), 5A, and 49 of the Act seek to give effect to that intention and nothing more. The fourth is to give the minister the power to regulations on the procedures and criteria that bargaining councils must take into consideration. The Code of Good Practice, on the other hand, is intended to provide practical guidance on picketing in support of any protected strike or in opposition to any lockout. It is intended to be a guide to those who may be contemplating, organizing, or taking part in a picket, and for those who, as employers or employees or members of the general public, that may be affected by it. Honorable Chair, we are aware of the issues that the Auditor General has raised, and they are receiving focused attention. We are confident that we are making progress in getting these matters corrected along lines of what the AG has recommended. Honorable members, you will recall that South Africa assumed the chair of two international bodies, that is SADC and BRICS. I'm pleased to report that we hosted a successful session of the SADC Ministers of Employment and Labor and Social Partners in March 2018 in Cape Town. With respect to BRICS, as the current chair, the Minister of Labor assumed the chair of the Jobs and Employment Chapter, which take place both at technical and ministerial level through the Labor Employment Ministerial Meeting. I am pleased to report that we hosted technical team recently in preparation for the ministerial session late in the year. South Africa continues to get recognition of what it has to offer shaping the international discourse. Recently, the ILO has invited our President, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, to take a leading role in the ILO's Global Commission on the Future of Work as co-chair with the Prime Minister of Sweden. This represents a profound recognition and confidence in what South Africa has to offer in shaping the global agenda on topical issues. We are even more excited that in addition to the ILO invitation to co-chairing the Commission, the ILO has also extended an invitation in advance to our President to address the ILO Centenary Conference in June 2019, pleasantly coinciding as it does with historical year of the celebration of the birth of South Africa's first democratic elected president, the late President Nelson Mandela. This is indeed a gesture of the highest honor for South Africa and its people. Let me conclude by thanking the Deputy Minister of Labor, Inkosi Advocate Patekile Holomisa, for his unwavering support. Also extend my sincere gratitude to the acting chairperson and honorable members of the Portfolio Committee of Labor for your continued support and guidance in executing our work. Let me also extend my gratitude to our social partners for always being there when we need them, and to the Director General and his team for their support. I hereby table the 2018-19 budget vote 28 totaling 3.2 billion rands for the Department of Labor for your consideration, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The next speaker is the Honourable van Schalkwyk.
Agbare voorsitter, agbare ministers en adjunkministers, agbare lede, gaste in die galery, mede-Suid-Afrikaners, goeiemôre. Ek wil vanoggend hierdie debat opdra aan ons ontslape voorsitter Fezeka Loliwe. By die geleentheid wil ek ook baie dankie sê aan al ons lede van die portfolio komitee, reg oor alle politieke partye, as ook die direkteur-generaal en sy span, en baie spesiaal die ministerie wat my so mooi geondersteun het gedurende hierdie paar maande. As ons vandag in die middel van werkersmaand staan, en ek bevoorreg is om as waarnemende voorsitter aan die laaste begrotingsdebat van arbeid van die 5de parlement deel te kan neem, kan ons nie beweeg voordat ons nie 'n terugblik op die verlede gehad het nie. The evolution of our labor laws and workers' rights come a long way, honourable members. The journey can be traced back to the Masters and Servants Act of 1853, which were designed to suppress workers and repress trade unions. These laws require the obedience and loyalty from servants to their masters, with infringements of the contract punishable before the court of law, often with a jail sentence with hard labor. Our people were sent to potato farms for failure to produce a dompas and for being at a place without a valid work seeker's permit. Prior to 1995, an employee could be dismissed in terms of the contract of employment, which could permit any reason for dismissal. Since 1995, an employee may be dismissed only for misconduct, operational reasons, and incapacity. The Labour Relations Act 1995 is a pivotal piece of legislation as it recognizes the need for fast and easy access to justice in labour disputes. It is fact and not fiction that through the ANC, workers today are able to seek employment wherever they choose. Once in employment, they can count on protection against unfair labour practices. Workers today can sit around the table with their employers and negotiate their working conditions. These things did not fall from the sky, but it was as a result of the hard work of the ruling party and those who are the friends of progress. You will also be aware that South Africa is guided by the international best practices when it comes to crafting labour relations regulatory framework. We draw a lot from the International Labour Organization's conventions and recommendations when developing our labour relations dispensation. In addition, all our labour laws have to pass the scrutiny of the robust economic and social impact assessment, and most importantly, they also have to be in line with the spirit and the letter of the Constitution. These various tests through which our labour laws have to undergo give most of us a degree of comfort that we are at least not trampling on the fundamental rights of our citizens. As a matter of fact, our labour laws are a direct expression of our Bill of Rights, which of course owes its origins from the 1955 Freedom Charter and nothing more. None of our labour laws fall outside the Bill of Rights. Honourable Chairperson, no one disputes the fact that lasting victory over poverty and hunger requires the creation of decent work opportunities and sustainable livelihoods for all our people. South Africa's democratic elections from 1994 to date were about the aspirations and collective desire for a better South Africa and a better life for all. They were about a journey to bring an end to the legacy of apartheid and to build a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous South Africa. I submit, therefore, that decent work is the foundation of the fight against poverty and inequality, and its promotion should be the cornerstone of all our efforts. The creation of decent work and sustainable livelihoods remain at the core of the ANC's government's agenda. The task of addressing joblessness, poverty, and inequality is the responsibility of all of us and not just one social partner. For this, we need to stop the blame game and demonstrate that we are indeed committed to the future of this beloved country. The majority of South African workers have no other place they call home other than South Africa. They do not carry 2 passports. Therefore, if South Africa is in trouble, they do not have a holiday home in some exotic island in the middle of an ocean somewhere. They literally have nowhere else to run to. South Africa is all what they have. Therefore, building and defending hard-fought freedom is not an option, but a duty. Former President Nelson Mandela once said, and I quote, "The challenges in South Africa are not for government alone, but are equally challenges for our social partners. None of our goals are achievable by government working in its own corner alone," close quote. This is so apt considering the levels of socioeconomic deficit in this country. We recognize that a society based on poverty for many and prosperity for a few carries the biggest risk to all of us. During the platinum strike of the recent past, I overheard one worker representative pose a very sharp question, and it went something like this: "If you won't let us dream, we won't let you sleep." What happens when real opportunity for everyone earning below the poverty line evaporates entirely? What happens when people can't find decent paying jobs that they can afford to live on? What happens when people have had enough? These questions are indeed difficult, but in a small way, the ANC government, through the policy interventions, is providing answers to these questions. The debates on the national minimum wage is a case in point. Often those who oppose the interventions are those that are living comfortably in the leafy suburbs. Some of them have never worked for someone else in their entire lives. I call it they were born with a silver spoon in their mouths. Some of them do not understand what it means to work for nothing but tips, like some of our waiters and waitresses in the restaurants. Those, as the Minister of Labour once said, who claim in well-spoken English to care about workers, but when they are asked to sign on the national minimum wage, they show their true colours by opposing every attempt that the ANC is placing before Parliament in the interest of workers. "History will judge you harshly," she said. "At least today we know who really cares about the low-paid workers." Honourable Chairperson, let me highlight a couple of what is considered to be key achievements in the MTSF. Progress in moderating workplace conflict through advocating a multi-year approach to collective bargaining agreements. This is confirmed by the decrease in the number of unprocedural strikes recorded since then. In the past, a trade union had to have 50+1% representativity in order to qualify for majority rights, such as the right to union representativeness and access to information. Today, even in cases where a union does not command the 50%+1 representativity, a commissioner may award majority rights to a union that is considered to be sufficiently representative as long as no other union in that workplace already has majority rights. In terms of Section 186, a dismissal is no longer just limited to the termination of a contract of employment by an employer, but termination of an employment. This means that where an employee is stationed with a client of a temporary employment service and the client decides to terminate his employment, the employee can refer the client to the CCMA irrespective of the contract with a temporary employment service due to the fact that the employment relationship is between the employee and the client. Fixed-term contract that exceeds 3 months without justifiable reason will result in that employee automatically becoming a permanent employee. Fixed-term employees working for longer than 3 months must work under and receive the same benefits as all other permanent employees, unless a justifiable reason to differentiate in terms and conditions exist, such as the length of service, seniority, etc. Review proceedings brought by employees in respect of arbitration awards handed down by, for example, the CCMA, will no longer suspend the enforcement of those arbitration awards unless certain considerations apply. This will bring to an end the tendency of some employees who take CCMA awards on review merely to frustrate a worker. Honourable Chairperson, whilst these achievements are profound, we are aware of a number of challenges that the department still need to deal with, including the issues raised by the Auditor General. We therefore request the Minister to note all the issues raised by the AG and to ensure special and focused attention needs to be given. These include, but not limited to, concerns of the AG about fruitless and wasteful expenditure, underperformance on certain programs, regression in the unemployment insurance front. Notwithstanding the challenges that are there, we want to recommend the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration for being the shining example of what running an institution should be. The CCMA is indeed the jewel in the Department of Labour crown. Keep up the good work, CCMA. You are making us proud. We acknowledge that we came from a very difficult past with the compensation fund, where in some instances backlog as far as the 70s could only be dealt with in the recent past. This shows indeed how the service to our workers has been dealt with back then. But through the action plan by the not so brand new Commissioner Mafata to address the challenges in the compensation fund, notable improvements continues to produce. The Department of Labour performed well in 2016-17, obtaining an overall achievement of 74% and a 75% on the employment creation strategic objective. The committee notes the slow pace in which vacant funded posts are filled and therefore recommend that, taking into consideration the high level of unemployment in our country, it is important that vacant funded posts should be filled without delay by the department and its entities. In the current financial year, the department and its entities received a total of 3.295 billion rand. The budget allocation has increased by 75.8 million rand from 2017-18 allocation in real terms. We know that in the current economic climate, the norm is a reduction in the allocation of the departmental budgets, but the ANC government supports the important role of the Department of Labour and its entities, and therefore the increase of the allocation to, among other things, ensure that there are 35.8 million rand more available to employ inspectors and to provide them with the relevant tools of trade. This is a concern from all political parties in the committee that has been addressed, especially with the anticipation of pressure that will be put on its resources after the implementation of the national minimum wage. As we know, honourable members, there are currently many employers who are not adhering to the low wages prescribed by the sectoral determinations, and even more might take their chances with the national minimum wage, hence this provision. Ensure that the budget of the CCMA be reviewed to 963.1 million rand, an increment by 48.8 million rand to reflect the increased responsibilities that will come with the implementation of the labour law amendments currently being considered. To advance the purpose of the Public Employment Service Programme to provide assistance to companies and workers to adjust to the changing labour market conditions and regulate private employment agencies, an amount of 160.2 million rand goes to non-profit organizations, namely Deaf Federation of South Africa, the National Council for the Blind, workshops for the blind and work centers for the disabled. We are indeed showing that the ANC is a caring government towards the vulnerable, disabled and the poor. We, however, know that unemployment is rife and therefore we need to see an increase in the placement of rate of job seekers. We encourage other government departments to use services offered by this program. The strategic objective of the Labour Activation Programme is to enhance employability of UIF beneficiaries, enable entrepreneurship and preserve jobs. In this regard, the UIF aims to target 450,000 beneficiaries with learning and workplace opportunities and achieve a 90% training layoff scheme applications with complete information recommended or declined by the Project Adjudication Committee. To deal with the unemployment challenge will require all hands on deck, predicated on strong partnerships. The National Development Plan calls for a social compact to reduce poverty and inequality and to raise employment and investment levels. It is therefore clear that for us to move the country forward, all of us need to put the country and our people first. The current phenomenon of grandstanding to score cheap political points by misleading our vulnerable citizens in the hope of convincing them to abandon the ANC and put you, the DA, in power in 2019 must be rejected at all costs. Bob Marley coined a line in one of his songs which went like, "You can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time." Die werkers van Suid-Afrika weet wie gee werklik om vir hulle sosiale welvaart. Hulle weet ook wie is die wolwe in skaapklere. Hulle weet dat die ANC nie langer sal toelaat dat hulle tevrede moet wees met krummels wat van die basis se tafels afval nie. Omdat baie van die werkers in die kwesbare sektore laags geskoold is, beteken nie dat hulle dom is nie. Stop taking them for a ride because they are not fools. The ANC supports the budget. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Bahrain.
Mr. Chairman, I stand here on behalf of the Democratic Alliance and I express complete disdain and horror with regard to the proposed budget indicating business as usual. Mr. Chairman, I have the matriarch of the Bahrain family, Dorothy, here today, welcome, and my wife Patsy and all her friends, and thank you. We have almost 9.2 million unemployed in South Africa, and we are on the cusp of losing a further 1 million jobs on the forthcoming introduction of a national minimum wage. The Honourable Minister Oliphant presides over a failed Department of Labour and is merely twiddling her thumbs while South Africa burns. Because of the failure of our government to create jobs and because of the Labour Regulatory Authority applying a handbrake to employment, we have increased crime and poverty. It is a crying shame that our current government is doing everything in its power to make it impossible for businesses to take in new staff. In fact, I've just heard that the Durban offices of the Department of Labour are still closed after 2 years. Everyone, forget about claiming UIF if you live in Durban. The Democratic Alliance will ease up the regulations, spend more money on enforcement, and deregulate employment for start-up businesses. The Democratic Alliance is already showing results where it governs. The Auditor General, in its preliminary report, relays enormous problems in its high-level risk assessment of the Department of Labour. There are numerous concerns identified, and every single section of the Department of Labour has not only failed South Africa, but has failed those who want to try and collect UIF. It's failed everyone who's injured on duty, and has failed the businesses that are trying to register with the various sections of the department. The Department of Labour itself does not seem to be able to structure its financial management, and it is said that there's in fact no contract management at all. Fraud is on the increase, and past cases haven't been properly prosecuted. Indeed, if the Department of Labour was a company in the private sector, we would have collapsed it many years ago. The past 20 years has been dismal, and it needs a new and innovative government to come in and build a better future. The South African workforce, and indeed every worker who has been paying into workmen's compensation and UIF, should vote very clearly for the DA in order to show that they require better treatment and respect. Minister, in essence, we're spending a lot of money, Minister, a lot of money on a department which is clearly unable to run itself. And all the while, we are going further and further into more and more unemployment. We are unable to monitor and enforce the labor legislation that we already have. And the only response that we get from this moronic department is to make more stringent, onerous laws and regulations. It is an oxymoron to call this department the Department of Labor, as in fact the Department of Labor is not working. To state that Labor isn't working is an understatement, because, Honourable Minister, you are creating an environment where not only your people aren't working, but they're encouraging others not to work as well. Honourable Minister, last year we pointed out to you that there were numerous fraud cases, and you hadn't taken action against those fraudulent individuals. The most that you could do was to suspend people on full pay, pending inquiries which have taken years. This is not even a slap on the wrist. However, we note that there's a new batch of fraud cases within your department. Over 70 have already been reported, and the process has hardly been embarked upon to try and even dismiss the individuals. Last year, the Compensation Fund reported 116 frauds, most of which haven't been properly investigated, and 12 of these cases have been on your register for more than a year. There's an estimated value of 6.6 million has been stolen. The fund has a financial misconduct register that currently has 216 cases, of which 168 are still under investigation. I don't think anyone's doing anything. I'm sure when we come here next year, we will report that the investigation continues and continues and continues while staff earn their salary sitting at home. These investigations have taken, in most cases, up to 4 years. Evidence gets lost, officials resign, and there's no consequence for fraudulent behavior. The Democratic Alliance cannot be seen to be asking the good citizens of South Africa to pay their taxes towards UIF, workmen's compensation. The money is stolen and then recklessly dealt with. For instance, duplicate payments made and loans issued to medical service providers in prior years have not been recovered, despite this being pointed out to the Minister last year. It is stated there's a culture of poor performance and weak internal control environment. Who would support this budget? It's disgusting. The Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration, the CCMA, is probably the only small section within the department which is working properly. And we have been told that their budget will remain the same, if not slightly smaller. And yet the ANC government is wanting to boast that they're going to implement a national minimum wage, which will increase the workload of the CCMA by over 30%. The CCMA Commissioner himself has said that this workload increase of 30% will mean that he does not have the budget to implement the national minimum wage. Why do we make rules and regulations which we know we won't be able to implement or monitor?
Point of order, Slan.
Honourable Bahrain, will you just take your seat, please?
Ngifuna ukubuza ukuthi uthini ngalabantu base Cape Wine ababaholela ngewine na? Uthini ngalabantu bala abasahlupheka abamnyama mabefuna amavoti bebathengela utshwala amawine no brown bread?
Honourable Member,
Kubizwa ngani
please
lokho?
take your seat. That's not a point of order. Continue, Honourable Bahrain.
It is disgusting to try and hoodwink South Africa and the hard-working citizens by telling them that they're going to get fancy new legislation and then leave them high and dry. Their expectations are enormous, but delivery will be nil. The Democratic Alliance government will implement a national minimum wage in accordance with each sector and will ensure that the inspectorate are properly resourced and that the retrenchments will come to a halt. The DA will ensure that the future workforce is properly educated and trained, and that small businesses will be able to make room for more staff so as to enable the economy to grow once again. Honourable Minister, I expect you to hang your head in shame as you have presided over a complete failure of both the Department of Labour and job creation. With our youth at almost 50% unemployment, you have given us no hope other than to ensure that we have a change of government. I want to thank the Honourable Ollis for the training that I received in the past. Thank you for everything and all the help that I have received, and I wish you good luck with your future career. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I now call upon Honorable Nolunchungu.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the EFF rejects the Department of Labor budget. As the EFF, we are shocked that the ANC government, through this department, is hell-bent on the worst attack on workers' rights since 1994, through the proposed labor laws and slave wage of 20 rands per hour as national minimum wage. The right to strike ballot, a living wage and a decent working conditions are workers' rights which we are prepared to fight for as the EFF, and we support all workers' rights irrespective of their unions in defending these rights. Minister, if you are willing to test the workers with the strike ballots, picketing rule, longer conciliation and compulsory arbitration, you must continue with your bills. Workers of the world are uniting and be warned. It is your arrogance that will fall and be met with the force of workers. While we welcome the national minimum wage in principle, we reject the 20 rands per hour proposed rate. This is nothing but an extension of the EPWP that will trap workers in low wages for the rest of their working life, while companies and bosses live lavishly out of profits. We reject the labor broker and have long called for insourcing of workers in government, universities, state-owned companies, and in private sector. It is for this reason why we will be introducing two very important private members' bills. We are going to introduce a private member bill to ban all labor brokers, to restore workers' dignity, to advance the struggle for better working conditions and living wage. We are going to introduce a private member bill to ensure that no person works for governments through a third party, and all workers are employed on a full-time basis with pension and medical aid, since the public health care has completely collapsed. Farm workers, taxi drivers, domestic workers, cleaners, nurses, teachers, and all other workers continue to work in shocking conditions. We are going to expropriate land without compensation for equal distribution to improve their conditions. We are going to expropriate land without compensation for equal redistribution to improve the condition of farm workers. And all farm workers shall share in the ownership of agricultural land. We are going to expropriate land without compensation for equal redistribution for domestic workers to build homes. We are going to expropriate land without compensation for taxi drivers to drive short and manageable distances. All workers need land. It is a matter of fact that in this country and across the world, women continue to get paid far more less than men are paid for the same job. This is why we are calling for a national review of salaries in government and in private sector to ensure that women are paid as much as men for doing the same job. Equally, this must also be done for black people to get paid the same money as white workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Can I call upon Honorable Ngwezi?
Honorable Chairperson, the IFP would like to note with serious concern the shockingly high unemployment rate in South Africa that has continually moved from bad to worse. We are of the view that the lingering joblessness and high rate of youth unemployment has not been met with the responsiveness that is required from government, and that it is high time something effective is implemented. It is particularly concerning that 39% of all unemployed people in this country have never worked before. The figure amongst young people is sitting at 60.3%, which is insanely high compared to other African countries that are classified as upper middle income countries. Chairperson, it is alarming that the annual unemployment growth rate in South Africa is of 4.8%, is double that of employment rate, which stands at 2.4%, which means that the trend is persisting, yet still no radical action on the part of government to create employment opportunities is being effected. The National Development Plan goal of reducing unemployment by 6% by 2030, as it stands, is unattainable. The unrelenting unemployment amongst the young people who have completed their matric, those who have graduated from tertiary institutions, and those who dropped out from school for a variety of reasons are a cause for grave concern. This state is also exacerbated by a demand for more work experience from both government and private sector. Despite the amendment of the Labor Relations Act in 2010 and the High Court ruling on the 13th of July that gave employees hired by labor brokers benefit if they remain employed by companies for more than 3 months, labor broking remains the main cause of unemployment, as employees hired through this process are easily displaced from their places of employment. The minimum wage proposed by the government of 20 rand per hour is not a living wage and is far below the daily expenses of many workers, which include transport to and from work and daily subsistence provisions. In that regard, the IFP supports the sectoral determination for minimum wage. We nonetheless support this budget, Honorable Chairperson, this budget vote in the interest of better labor relations in our country. And Chairperson, I would request to leave because I have another committee that is sitting, another budget vote. It will not be disrespecting you, Honorable Minister and members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ngwezi. Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. The National Freedom Party welcomes the report of the Department of Labor tabled here today. Allow me at the outset to express our disappointment at the decision to postpone the implementation of the national minimum wage. Whilst we accept that extensive deliberations took place on the introduction of the national minimum wage, we call on the department and all stakeholders to accelerate the process, Minister, of concluding on this matter and ensure that the proposed minimum wage is implemented without any further delay. Now, when we talk about labor as Honorable Chairperson, it reminds me of my forefathers when they were brought from India here to work as indentured laborers in the farms, in the sugarcane plantations. And they lived under the most shocking and inhumane conditions. Pain, suffering, abuse, long hours, and yes, it reminds me, Mama Kaula, brown bread and black tea. That is what they used to be given. So I think as a country, as a government, we have come a long way from the abuse of our workers suffered pre-1994 during the apartheid days to today, where we have been able to give them protection and ensure that the conditions under which they work are much more humane. Honorable Chairperson, we acknowledge the expected impact that the national minimum wage will have on approximately 6.6 million workers and their families. While many unions in South Africa represent a large percentage of employees, let us not forget about the millions of our citizens that are either unemployed or are on the low-income category, which seem to be marginalized or left out completely. Honorable Chairman, this is aggravated by the large number of foreigners employed in the country. Now, we already know we have about a 26.7% unemployment rate in South Africa. And this is being aggravated by the fact that foreigners are coming into South Africa, and of course you don't blame them because of the challenges they face in their own countries. And also we have to be mindful of the fact that these are the countries that stood by us when we needed the most, when we needed to liberate ourselves. However, we also need to be mindful that it is having an impact on employment in South Africa, and that is becoming a serious problem. If you actually advertise for certain fields of employment, you will find that 99 out of 100 of them that are applying are foreigners. A lot of them are illegal, and they are being exploited by employers, and that is why you would find some of them will not want you to have a minimum wage. The reason for that is so they can continue exploiting our laborers by paying them very, very little wages, and that is exactly the rationale behind some of them not wanting us to pay our people a decent wage. Now, we need to get the department together with Home Affairs and the other relevant departments to work on this to try and prevent this, because if we don't, we are going to have dire consequences at some stage. We must also be mindful, Minister, through the chair, that there's about 1 million people entering the job market every year, either through those that are graduated or those that have dropped out of school. And the percentage of jobs that we are creating are far lower than that. And that is why I think we need to address that. And if we don't address that, you're going to have so many unemployment, and the rate is going to increase. And we must also be mindful when we talk about the unemployment rate increasing, we must also be mindful of the increase in the population. So it's not just a matter of that the unemployment rate is increasing, but the population is also increasing as well. So we need to be mindful of that, to take that into consideration so that we can create more jobs. And I think what is very important, we need to create an environment where when learners, students, graduates are coming out, there is jobs being able to be created. So the National Freedom Party supports the budget vote table, because preventing or objecting to a budget vote will not take the country forward. We need to find solutions.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I call upon the Deputy Minister.
Honorable Chairperson, Minister of Labour, Mam Oliphant, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Acting Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Honorable Members, officials of the Department, distinguished guests, including representatives of our social partners at NEDLAC, the ILO, my family led by my wife, Nosmanye, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is indeed an honor for me to once again stand before you on the occasion of the debate on the budget vote 28 of the Department of Labour. Chairperson, we dip our banner also in honor of the unknown and unheralded soldiers who die fighting for the economic well-being of the nation, deep underground in search of gold and other precious metals, the mine workers, especially the 7 men who recently lost their lives in Carletonville. We convey our heartfelt condolences to their grieving families and fellow workers. Honorable Chairperson, 2 weeks ago, workers celebrated the 23rd anniversary of Workers' Day since its declaration as a public holiday in South Africa. This public holiday bears testimony to the struggles that workers in this country and in other parts of the globe have waged for their rights and social justice in the workplace over many decades. South African labor movement understood and consistently maintained that the workplace struggles could not be separated from the broader social struggles, that economic justice and equality could not be achieved without workers playing a meaningful role in shaping the discourse. In this, the 22nd anniversary of the adoption of our Constitution, the 45th anniversary of the 1973 Durban strike, the 63rd anniversary of the Freedom Charter, we pay tribute to the millions of workers who sacrificed so much so that all South Africans could today enjoy their fundamental rights of being true citizens in their country. Chairperson, when the ANC took power in 1994, it knew that undoing over 300 years of colonial and apartheid repression was not going to be easy. The ANC also knew that it would take time to achieve all the things we had set out to do. Seminal documents ready to govern and the Reconstruction and Development Program served as the blueprint on what had to be done. Today, as we take you through the path we have traversed in pursuit of the labor relations transformation agenda, we must equally reaffirm our commitment to soldier on. The Department of Labor is alive to its mandate of ensuring that there is decent work pursued under conditions of freedom, equity, security, and human dignity. Chairperson, allow me to, albeit very briefly, explain the framework within which we do our work. We are guided by the Service Delivery Improvement Plan, established and maintained by the Executive Authority. The Service Delivery Improvement Plan is in turn prepared in line with the medium-term strategic framework, the strategic plan, the annual performance plan, and other relevant prescripts. The 2014-2019 medium-term strategic framework sets ambitious targets for the Executive Authority, and we want to use this opportunity to report. Whilst there are areas where we have recorded exceptional progress, there are areas that are still work in progress. Whilst progress to date is relatively satisfactory, you are the first to admit that there is still a long way to go. Last year, we made a commitment to strengthen inspection and enforcement in general and on compliance with employment equity law in particular. We are pleased to report that we have made notable improvements on this front. We have registered an increase in the number of companies that were subjected to DG reviews for non-compliance during this period. We reviewed 1,550 companies in total this period. 45 of these companies were referred to court, and their cases await the court's decision. Despite the Johannesburg Stock Exchange claiming in the media that their listed companies were all compliant, we reviewed and discovered 74 of their listed entities that were found to be non-compliant. Whilst we could do better than this going forward, this is a good start. We are taking steps to further enhance our capacity on this front by beefing up the number of employment equity inspectors. I am happy to report that the process towards the promulgation of Section 53 of the Employment Equity Act, dealing with the issuing of certificates of compliance as a requisite for accessing state contracts, have been finalized. This will ensure that no organization or service provider will be permitted to do business with the state unless they comply with the Employment Equity Act. With regards to enhancing the employability prospects of UIF beneficiaries through skills development and capacity building, the Minister has already confirmed that we will continue to leverage our partnerships with the Department of Higher Education and Training, the TVET colleges, and Public Works. We are aware of the challenges in programs such as the training layoff schemes and the turnaround programs. However, I'm happy to indicate that these are receiving focused special attention. With respect to 59 scuba diving learners who had completed their training but were still awaiting integration to workplaces, 38 were placed. The remaining 21 learners are still awaiting integration within the South African Police Services, Transnet, National Port Authority, and SANDF. Working with the AgriSETA, a total of 59 cooperatives were provided with training in farming and management skills in the period under review. Productivity South Africa has, on the other hand, provided support to 71 companies facing economic distress by restructuring and improving their productivity and operational efficiency, thereby mitigating the impact of retrenchments, resulting in 8,515 jobs being saved. In addition, Productivity SA supported 590 companies that were in distress, resulting in 45,232 jobs being retained. We're happy that our interventions are beginning to pay social and economic dividends on job retention and enhancing the employability of our people. Plans are in place to upscale the scope and reach of the labor activation program. Chairperson, whilst there are some improvements in the compensation fund administration, there is still a lot of work to be done. The recently revised organizational structure of the fund holds the promise to deal with the remaining challenges. I can report, for example, that the claims environment, which was the major source of complaints for many years, is showing huge improvements since we last appeared before this House. The fund has completely wiped out the backlog in claims. The fund is modernizing its service delivery infrastructure, and as a result, 88% of the claims are today finalized in 21 days, a far cry from what it used to be in the past. The fund has made a commitment that it will have resolved all the current bottlenecks in the claims environment by 2019. Chairperson, it would be amiss of me not to touch on the challenges that still confront us and what we are doing about them. On the service delivery front, we have recently developed a revised service delivery plan, taking into account operational service delivery challenges and those that are raised by the Auditor General. The acting chairperson of the Portfolio Committee has raised in her input the concern that the Unemployment Insurance Fund has fallen from being the benchmark of efficiency to a level where it was recently smacked with a disclaimer by the AG. The UIF management has put together an action plan to change the audit opinion for the better. Already the action plan is delivering some positive results, with the interim audit by AXA so far indicating a likelihood of improving from disclaimer to qualified with findings. The AG has raised numerous areas of concern and areas of major concern in the department and across all its entities. It is only the CCMA, as has been said, that has but one insignificant concern from the AG, with the department and other entities being a mixed bag of areas of concern, and those that the AG considers to be of major concern, the issues such as underspending, leadership challenges, consequence management, vacancy rate, annual statements, IT governance, human resources, wasteful and fruitless expenditure will be firmly on our radar as part of our oversight and monitoring role in the remaining medium-term period. I can assure you, members, that we are aware of the issues that the AG has raised, and we will make sure that the Director General and his management team give those issues the attention they deserve. There will be consequence management. We have also noted the issues raised in the report of the Portfolio Committee on the strategic plans of the Department of Labor and its entities. We take note of the key issues that are flagged as the key issues for consideration by Parliament. We have also noted the 6 recommendations that the committee wants the Minister to consider. We will keep the committee informed of progress in this regard. Chairperson, as we move towards the end of the 2014-2019 medium-term strategic framework, our major key priorities going forward will be focused on service delivery and those areas in the MTSF that are somewhat lagging behind. You will notice that our budget allocation weighting takes into account the areas that require capacity enhancements going forward. Of the total DOL budget vote, 5 key programs will take the biggest share of the budget, given the challenges and workload that await them. CCMA with an allocation of 963 million rand, administration 917.3 million rand, inspection and enforcement 598.2 million rand, public employment services 582.7 million rand, and NEDLEC with an allocation of 31.7 million rand. The CCMA workload will increase significantly, likewise that of the inspection and enforcement services, as a consequence of the National Minimum Wage Bill, the Basic Conditions of Employment Amendment Bill, and the Labor Relations Amendment Bill. The budget allocation attempts to address this reality. Administration and public employment services will be expected to play a much more visible role in the remaining medium-term period. Public employment services will need more resources as it shifts its focus from too much emphasis on registration of work seekers to placement of work seekers. Administration will have to prioritize ramping up the service delivery infrastructure and dealing with issues raised by the AG. Other programs and entities that are not mentioned, their budgets have also been enhanced through, though in moderation in some instances. Our work going forward will be underpinned by the call of President Ramaphosa in his State of the Nation address that 2018 is the year of encouraging significant new investments in our economy. To this end, we will mobilize all levers in our portfolio to contribute to the achievement of this objective. This leaves me with having to thank the Minister for his support from the inception of the 5th Administration 2014. Thank you to the Acting Chairperson, Honorable Van Schalkwyk, and members of the Portfolio Committee, who I have noticed that when they are deliberating on issues of concern to the department, are collegial in their undertaking of the work. The amount of criticism and the amount of criticism that characterizes some of the speeches is rarely ever found in the deliberations that take place in the Portfolio Committee, where the actual work of the committee takes place. I commend them to continue to do so I thank also the DG, the all management and staff of the department for their continued support as well as the staff in the ministry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Before I call upon the next speaker, honorable members, let us welcome the learners from Eguruleni Primary School in Kraaifontein. We have got learners from grade 4, 5, and 6 who have just visited Parliament to see how the proceeding goes. You are welcome, beautiful learners. Thank you. I now call upon Honorable Nkwankwa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Abasebahle molweni ke betuna man. House Chair, workers withhold their labor as the chief weapon in their struggle for higher wages and a decent life. In other words, workers' ability to strike remains the most successful and often the only means to address systemic inequality. Any attempt to limit or undermine this weapon constitutes a conscious effort to perpetuate and indeed intensify inequality. This is clearly what the Labor Relations Amendment Bill intends to do in terms of as some of the stakeholders view it. For instance, as issues, Minister, as if this is a stack record. Remember, that debate a minimum wage were highlighted as concerns that as near unions, near labor movements have about issues a secret ballot, a longer conciliation period, advisory arbitration, and so on. But there's an issue which I want to highlight, which comes from one of the unions, in particular, SAFTU, where they are concerned about the fact that, Bati Minister, after there were deliberations in the portfolio committee, I think on the 17th of April, about around these issues that they raised, and they are still continuing to try and advocate for, that most of their submissions and inputs were to a large extent completely disregarded after the process had been taken back to the Department of Labor so that it could then redraft the relevant bills. We would like you to attend to that because it remains a primary concern. Look, when we're debating in the Department of Arts and Culture debate, we said that it's important in an attempt and in a way, a strategy of trying to build social cohesion. We bring everyone on board. Singashili abantu ngaphandle, right? Would like you to hear you address that. But Minister, there is an issue upper le department, you call it the Inspection and Enforcement Services, which regulates employment and non-employment conditions. You've reduced the budget in real terms by 1.7%, but in our view, it's one of the departments that is not entirely effective. I remember reporting an incident where a restaurant owner here in the Western Cape declared it publicly to people he does not employ black South Africans. And then they continued up in Cape Town. And then they continued, and they still continue even today, employers in this province and other parts of the country where they exploit our fellow African brothers and sisters. But you see what is happening is that they pit Africans against each other. They pit Africans against each other. They employ abantu abamnyama baba exploit and push others out of the system and say, we don't need you in your own country. And then xenophobia who cries. Once there's xenophobic violence, we have to address those issues because of our we have to say those things. Did we finish the other issue, Minister, that we must talk about and be very concerned about. Remember, this minimum wage was set long before a decision was taken to increase VAT in a fuel levy, right? Which means now, class it like 3,500. See, kumbulu last year, and gogo there is an increase here VAT glonyaka. Asikazi increase in zero-rated items. So says ngokola bantu bona matin batyiwa indlala since April 1, right? Now it means ukuthi izawuthi by the time you implement well and of months ukuthi ngoku imali yakhona siyincinci worse. The other issue, Minister, ndiyakubona Chairperson into obuzawunichukela uthi ixesha liphelile. Hayi aniyithandi UDM. Sizawunisapota nje okwangoku. Deputy Minister ulibele into ba enye inkosi yesibini apha leli chawe lume kule ndawo khange ulibulele.
Thank you so much. Honorable Alberts.
Point of
Thank-
order, Sihlalo.
Point of, what point of order, can you take your seat, Honorable Albert?
Ngiyabonga
Yes,
Sihlalo. Enifundeni la ukuthi amakhosi wonke arecognize.
No, Honorable.
Okwesibili
Khawula.
bengifuna ukwazi ukuthi ubani
Honorable
olapha
Khawula,
emuva
that's not
ogqoka
a point of
isigqoko
order.
ngaphandle apha awuvumelekile ukufaka igqoko la
That's not a
ngaphakathi.
point of order, Honorable Member, can you sit down?
Cha bengifuna ukwazi lo ogqoka isigqoko esibomvu siyesaba
Mama
bakithi.
Khawula ushuqulile nawe.
Cha ngisho isigqoko ubani
Nawe
losigqokile.
sengisho ukuthi ushuqulile.
Mina
naye
ngiyabonakala ubuso nakabonakali.
Uzosondela kwena Mama Khawula mesiqeda
Akasicela ukwazi ukuthi ubani.
Uzosondela Mama Khawula, can you continue?
Ngiyasaba
Honorable
yazi
Alberts?
manje na.
No, on Mama Khawula, can you sit down? Honorable Alberts, please.
Thank you, House Chair, Honourable Minister. An opinion piece by the political analyst R.W. Johnson reminded me of an important part of our history. Minister, in 1994, the ANC poster shouted out jobs, jobs, jobs. Unemployment then stood at 3.7 million, while today it stands at an eye-popping 9.4 million. One can only deduce that there is something seriously wrong with the government's economic policies. South Africa's labour force is still very young, and in most cases, this demographic dividend leads to economic growth. However, in our case, the situation opens us up to the possibility of revolution. With so many young people unemployed and no real hope to become employed, we have reason to be extremely concerned, Minister. Die probleem is natuurlijk dat die regering se ekonomiese beleid enerzijds en beleid wat die voorvereiste is vir ekonomiese groei, soos onderwys anderzijds, op die verkeerde spoor is en binnenkort met die aankomende trein met die naam van die realiteit gaan bots. Kom ons kyk na 'n paar aspekte in die verband. Eerstens, die bestaande arbeidsbeleid is daarop gerig om bestaande poste bloot te herverdeel en die unies toe te laat om onrealistiese verhogings te eis, veral in die staatsdiens. Herverdeling vind plaas deur middel van regstellende aksie en swart ekonomiese bemagtiging, terwyl werk al skaarser raak. Dit is uiteindelik nie volhoubaar nie. Tweedens, die instelling van 'n minimumloon is in 'n ideale wêreld wat sterk ekonomiese groei bestaan en baie werk beskikbaar is, wel 'n sinvolle gedagte. In ons wêreld is dit egter ekonomiese selfmoord met die werkers wat die grootste prys gaan betaal, want besighede gaan eenvoudig nie nog poste skep nie en gaan bestaande poste minder maak. So what is to be done in its place to rectify the situation? The most important prerequisite to ensure a growing economy and job creation and a future for our young people, apart from private property, is a quality secondary education. Unfortunately, the country's state of basic education is horrific, as evidenced by the low international rankings in mathematics and science. Most of these workers are employed in the agricultural sector, the ones who leave school, and they will become low-level workers. And unfortunately, in those agricultural and mining sectors, it is the easiest to mechanize, and it's happening right now at the moment, and jobs are being lost at an increasing pace, which is unfortunate but the reality. This brings me to the buzzword currently being used by many ministers, namely the fourth industrial revolution. This event is seen as a leverage that can enable economic growth in South Africa. The reality is, however, Minister, that this revolution presents one of the most dangerous attacks on human employment in history, in our known history. This event will not only replace basic employment, but will even present a danger for higher level jobs in the medical, financial, and legal industries, amongst others. This means that we will need to reframe the economic and labor debate completely going forward if we want to survive this coming revolution. Lastly, jobs require investment from local and international sources. Both are wary of uncertainty, and given the importance of certainty of property rights for economic growth, expropriation without compensation is the ultimate red flag for investment to take flight. And the decimation of the jobs starts right at this point, unfortunately. Minister, indien hierdie kwessies nie aangespreek word nie, sal die ekonomie nog steeds sy kreefte gaan en dinge sal verder agteruit gaan en ongelukkig sal werksgeleenthede bly soos mis voor die son verdwyn. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Adbels. Honorable Madishi.
Thank you very much. My chairperson, throughout Southern Africa, organized labor were at the forefront of the struggle for liberation and the fight for socio-economic rise. And history records that Labour has post-liberation held its former liberators to account for their failures. South African workers are therefore correct when they make demands for the corrections and accountability. As far back as the RDP white paper, our government acknowledged that growth and development were interdependent, that if we were to address the problems of poverty, gross inequality, unemployment, our economy would need to be firmly placed on a path of high and sustainable growth. And to succeed in achieving growth and development, and if millions of South Africans were to be afforded an opportunity to find a place in our formal economy, government needed an active and cooperative partnership with business and labor. It was for this reason that NEDLAC was established, a forum where a commitment to common goals would be turned into collective action and concrete program. The mandate of the Department of Labor is to regulate the labor market through policies and programs developed in consultation with, like I said, business and labor. But then there are very serious problems. That is why the whole world has looked at South Africa and has said, I give you an example, the World Economic Forum's global competitiveness is saying that we have dropped from number 28 to 61, which indicates that we're faced with problems. But even apart from that, the World Bank has said that we have even gone down from 28 to 82. Now that shows very serious problems. There is a lot of things that one would want to go into, but one will want to look into this thing of the living wage, Chairperson. I want to say that the millions of workers in South Africa don't enjoy that. We say that, or let me say, the ANC says that workers must get at least 20 rand per hour. Well, I said the other day that the president of South Africa gets more than 1,800 rand per hour. That's the first one. But secondly, you look around the world and you find very big countries such as China, which has 1.3 billion people with only 18 ministers. You go to America, which is extremely rich, with more than 350 million people. But then you compare that to South Africa with only around 54 million people. But then you have a rally of ministers. You talk about, if you take ministers and deputy ministers, you then talk about people who are beyond 71. Now, this is a very serious problem. And that money is supposed to go to the workers, in particular, the workers in the public service, but even more, the workers of the hand all over. That's why, through you, Chairperson, Minister, I brought here an example. You say, our people eat bread. They eat bread. Now, how much is this? You say, let them get 20 rand. Now here, this is 15 rand. Now, what are our people going to eat? You go to the rural areas. Our people eat pap or umngashu, but then look at what they are eating.
Your time is
This
over.
is 22 rand.
Your time
And
has expired.
these are major
Honourable Member.
problems that we're faced with. And therefore, Chairperson, as I sit down, I want to say the ANC government has failed, but we congratulate the workers.
Point of
that they
order,
have
Chair.
won,
Point of
today.
order, Chair.
And more must go on
Take the
and
point of
fight.
order. Yes, Honourable.
You have
Point
failed.
of order.
Yes, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Honourable members, can we give the minister, she's raising a point of order?
Chairperson, I would like to raise on a point of order. The Honorable Madisha is misleading the House. The bread is not 15 rand. It's a reflection that he's not buying the bread. There's
you.
no family.
Thank
It's
you,
10 rand,
Honourable.
11 rands.
Thank you so much, Honourable Minister. Let us take it as it was just a point of debate, sparkling the debate. Thank you very much. Can I now call upon
On a
Honourable
point of order,
Mjobo?
Chairperson.
Con-
On a point of order, Chairperson.
Yes, Honourable Member, what point of order are rising on?
Chairperson, the loaf of bread that the
Oh.
Honorable Madisha have shown is in fact 15
thank you
rand.
so much.
The minister is constantly
Thank you so
sending maybe
much,
perhaps a
Honourable
PA
Member.
to buy the bread. That's
Thank you
why
so
she
much,
don't know
Honourable
how much
Member.
it costs.
Honourable Mjobo, can you take the podium? Okay, honourable members, can you not round the speaker, please? Please, honourable members, you may start, Honourable Mjobo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members of Parliament, distinguished guests, officials of the Department of Labour, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Few months ago, our country lost Honorable Loliwe, who was the chairperson of the Committee on Labour. Allow me to pass message of condolences to her family, the ANC and its alliance partners. We have lost a dedicated female comrade who hold the committee together all the time. May her soul rest in peace, Makap. An integral part of the negotiations to end apartheid in South Africa was the creation of a new constitution, which prevent unfair discrimination. National legislations were enacted to prevent discrimination. One of such legislation is Employment Equity Act number 55 of 1998, which is a tool to achieve equity in the workplace by promoting equal opportunity and fair treatment in employment through elimination of unfair discrimination and implementation through elimination of unfair discrimination and implement affirmative action measures to redress the disadvantages in employment experienced by designated groups. Honorable Chairperson, it is common cause that women are oppressed based on race, gender, and class. Hence, I made reference to the Constitution and employment equity in the above passage. It is also to clarify those who claim that they stand for equal opportunities. However, they do not support and implement affirmative action. The high percentage of low-paid and vulnerable workers are women. The ANC call on you, Minister of Labour, to pay attention to this type of workers by capacitating and recruiting more inspectors. The truth of the matter is that some employers do not comply with the legislation passed by this House, and they are encouraged not to comply with such legislations by some parties in this House. It is my submission that resources and energy should be inspection and enforcement in order to protect vulnerable workers who are women. Honorable House Chairperson, we are aware that Unemployment Insurance Fund is by law charged to provide benefits such as illness, maternity, unemployment, and other benefits to millions of contributors when they are out of employment. It is my request, Minister, that the fund in its investment to have programs that benefit women. I am referring to a labor activation program in this regard. In conclusion, Chairperson, allow me to quote from a leaflet about past laws distributed by the ANC in Port Elizabeth during the protest marches in the 1950s. It means that no husband can ever be sure any day that his wife is his wife, nor can be sure that his children may not be taken away from him and sold to farmers under the pretext of failing to comply with the past regulation. How can any decent home built for the proper upbringing for the children? A man has only to come into any home or to stop a woman on the street and say he is a policeman or detective, and the law of the country empowers him to take away that woman and to touch any part of her body, as they can do with men under the pretext they are searching for a pass. Honorable Chairperson, the ANC speaks with confidence because it has been at the head of this national effort to change our country for the better. We know that together with you we can do more. On behalf of the African National Congress, I support Budget Vote 28 of the Department of Labor. This budget will improve the lives of women of South Africa. Ngiyabonga.
Sibonge kakhulu umhlonishwa uMjobo. Honorable Dudley.
Thank you, Chair, Honourable Ministers. In considering the Labour budget, the ACDP would just like to highlight 3 areas of concern. And firstly, it's not clear how far the department is in terms of being ready with regulations and other necessary measures for the implementation of both the new minimum wage bill and the Labour Laws Amendment Bill, which provides for parental and adoption leave. The excitement generated around these laws have left many people hopeful and anxious to be able to benefit. The second concern is linked to the first, and that is the realization that many more people will have no idea about their rights in terms of these pieces of legislation, and employers will also need to benefit from awareness campaigns. So the ACDP calls on the department to ensure that awareness campaigns, regulations and other measures necessary to deliver on the provisions of the bills are planned so that there are no unnecessary delays in implementation once the minimum wage bill and the Labour Laws Amendment Bill are signed into law. Now, the ACDP welcomes the progress made with regard to the minimum wage in South Africa, although we are troubled by the reality that the minimum wage is not a livable wage. We appeal to employers not to regard the minimum wage as a norm. It is only a worst-case scenario, which none of us should be guilty of. The ACDP is also encouraged by the support shown for the ACDP's Labour Law Amendment, and which has taken cautious but definite steps in recognising the importance of family and the need for parents to bond with their children and share childcare responsibilities. Lastly, the ACDP would like to raise concern about the lack of funds budgeted for labour inspectors, without which workers will be extremely vulnerable to the whims of unethical employers. Health and safety issues in the mining sector, for example, how many lives could be spared if inspections were being more regularly and thoroughly carried out. Farm workers are spread so far and wide they're unlikely to see labour inspectors very often. And this makes an even stronger argument for the need for awareness campaigns to target relevant sectors so that people know their rights and have at least some hope of standing up for themselves where budgets fail to do so. The ACDP will support the department in all efforts to provide and support workers' and families' needs in order to be productive and to build a stronger and more prosperous nation. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable America.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, a key driver of poverty, inequality and crime in South Africa is the very large proportion of our people that are unemployed. Honourable van Schalkwyk, it is a fact that it is because of the ANC, 9.2 million people in South Africa today are unable to find work, and provide for themselves and to provide for their families. What is more alarming is that over 50% of those in unemployment are young people. It is very concerning that once these young people have been in unemployment for a long period of time, it becomes nearly impossible for them to re-enter the job market. Research has consistently shown that registered small and medium-term enterprises face high cost of doing business. These are often, though not exclusively, related to those regulations which constrain the growth in output and employment. It is clear that we need to reduce red tape and provide more exemptions to small businesses. Honourable Chair, the Presidential High-Level Report confirms that young unemployed individuals, the disabled, as well as those in rural areas, constitute a large share of the unemployed who have never worked before. Yet, a first-time inexperienced employee bears the same cost to the employer as an experienced worker. The panel recommends that people below a certain age, those that have been unemployed for a long time, people in rural areas, and the disabled be employed without the firm being required to pay the minimum wage. The panel further recommends in these circumstances the setting of a separate wage in the form of a sectorial determination for vulnerable workers in the labour market. In terms of the Labour Relations Act, small companies in the same bargaining council as large companies are compelled to abide by the terms of the collective bargaining agreement. In practice, what this clause in the LRA has done unintentionally is to force the terms of an agreement reached by big companies and big unions onto SMMEs. The result is higher than manageable wages for SMMEs with negative consequences for economic growth and job creation. These are recommendations that are supported by the DA. We further propose that the separate code of good practice for small and medium-term businesses should be adopted. This will free those businesses from the constraint imposed by the LRA and the BCEA, thus creating opportunities to reduce costs and to create more jobs. The DA is committed to assist young South Africans in finding work by introducing a job seeker certificate allowance of 150 Rand per month, rolling out a National Job Centres project where unemployed people can access job vacancies, undertake online courses, and get assistance in preparing for job applications and interviews and receive employment counselling. Thirdly, introducing a national civilian service to provide work experience for unemployed matriculants. And fourthly, to provide incentives to businesses who are unemployed, who are employing more young people. Honourable Chair, unemployed Cape Townians have reason to smile. The City of Cape Town allocated 6.6 million Rand in its budgets to subsidise free bus rides for unemployed people in Cape Town. All their trips will be free of charge. This is specifically aimed at job seekers. This is another contribution from the DA-run city to create opportunities for the unemployed. The unemployed deserves a break. They deserve the dignity that a job will give them. They need to be heard. The president needs to walk with the unemployed. Most of all, they need a new beginning. The DA is a party for jobs. We fight for the unemployed. We fight for those who are marginalized and excluded. Where we govern, we commit ourselves to bring opportunities to all South Africans. We shall never desert the unemployed. All South Africans need a new beginning, and the DA will provide that new beginning. I thank you.
The next speaker is the Honourable Tongwane.
Modula situlo yo tlotlegang, matona le batlatsa tona, maloko a tlotlegang a ntlotheo molao, baeng ba ba tlotlegang le babogedi le bareetsi ko gae, Madume. Honorable Chairperson, I want to talk about the labor market regulatory polemics and the case for a social compact as the means to deal with the triple challenge of unemployment, poverty, and inequality in South Africa. I want to do this against the backdrop of existing active labor market interventions of the Department of Labor. Chairperson, similar to many developing countries, South Africa has a large population of youth between ages 14 to 35, representing more than 40% of the total population. Given the youthful nature of the South African population, many of the socio-economic challenges faced by the nation, such as, for example, poverty, inequality, unemployment, and poor health, are borne by the youth. Socio-political rights may have been archived, but for the youth, the struggle continues, not against the apartheid state, but against HIV and AIDS, against alcohol abuse, drug addiction, and crime. It continues for jobs, for free education, and for economic freedom. The announcement by the President of the convening a job summit provides an opportunity for all of us to rally behind a set of agreed interventions. The South African labor market is characterized by high levels of unemployment, poverty, and inequality in the context of slow economic growth. The instability of South Africa's economy lies in the distorted pattern of ownership and economic exclusion created by apartheid policies. The effects of decades of racial exclusions are still evident in both employment levels and income differentials. The fault lines of these differentials are principally racially defined, but also include skills levels, gender, and location. In South Africa, most low-income households live far from the centers of economic activities. The cost of searching for and getting to work are high, and information about work is often available, or if it is there, it reaches them late. In this context, labor market services are extremely important, including those that prepare work seekers and match them with opportunities. The ANC called for government to act to improve the quality of active labor market policies and create incentives for absorbing the young employed so that young unskilled job seekers can gain entry into employment. The expansion of vocational training, linking the skills development with industrial growth and job creation, and expanding support for youth, especially Black youth, in accessing and developing skills are also critical to the ANC's objectives of youth development and fighting unemployment. The ANC's 53rd National Conference of 2012 resolved to ensure that our programs and policies should focus on developing skills that are required by the economy so that the youth can become part of the mainstream economy. The National Development Plan has recommended that one of the ways to pave the way for accelerated economic progress in the context of low growth is breaking this incentive to hire young, unskilled work seekers by incentivizing the employment of young, unskilled work seekers. All this has been a demonstration of the ANC's quest to find a results-oriented youth development framework. Let me remind you that prior to 1994, there was no government institutions focused on youth development in this country. If it was there, then it only catered for some and not for the oppressed. It was only after the ANC was voted into government that youth development became an apex priority of the state. This has been complemented by strengthening the ability of the Department of Labor's role to match supply and demand in labor market. The department, through the Public Employment Services, continues to serve as intermediary in the labor market between demand and supply of labor. The department uses electronic employment registration system, which enables work seekers to register their qualifications, skills, and work experience, and also enables employers to register work and learning opportunities. As we speak, this program is beginning to give hope to the unemployed through the vocational counseling services provided by the department. During the past year, 666,719 work seekers were registered on the department's database, and more than 197,000 were provided with employment counseling and advised by employment counselors. About 12,517 work seekers were placed in employment, and more than 74,000 work opportunities were registered. Persons with disabilities continue to experience discrimination and are least likely to get employment opportunities in the labor market. The supported employment enterprises receives a transfer from the Public Employment Services Program, which is aimed at accelerating employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. However, we are concerned that transfers to supported employment enterprises was reduced by 8.1 million rand over the medium term, as this will have an impact on employment creation for persons with disabilities. The department has signed memorandum of understandings with technical and vocational education and training, TVET colleges. This is done to train UIF beneficiaries in order to fast-track their re-entry back into the labor market, enable entrepreneurship, and preserve jobs. In this regard, the UIF aims to target 450,000 beneficiaries with learning and workplace opportunities over the medium term. The ANC has shown its commitment to ensure that learners are trained in various skills disciplines, with a special focus on those that carry the promise of absorbing the learners on completion of their courses. Therefore, we do not train for the sake of training, but we target those skills where there is a demand in the economy and where learners have an option of starting their own businesses if they so choose. As we speak, there are workers who are being trained so that they can be marine pilots, and there are those who are being trained to be divers so that they can get job opportunities in place like the harbors and the quay in our country. Others are being trained in construction industry, doing this in conjunction with the National Skills Development Agency. As the ANC, we welcome the department's effort to improve public employment programs and making sure that they work better even in terms of slow economic growth. This will not only equip unemployed, especially the youth, with skills to survive, but also affording them the opportunity to better their prospects of finding employment. President Cyril Ramaphosa has, during the State of Nation address of 2018, reiterated that the young South Africans will be moved to the center of our economic agenda. The President emphasized the importance of partnership with organized labor, business, and community representatives in creating opportunities for young people through internship, apprenticeships, mentorship, and entrepreneurship. We remain committed to doing much more to improve the lives of all South Africans and to contribute to the advancement of the lives of all South Africans. Now, Honorable Bagram, as expected, pointed or pictured a picture of doom and gloom and gave no solutions to the challenges that the Department of Labor is currently addressing. All Mr. Bagram has done is to remind us that talk is cheap and that it is not subject to
Honourable Member, will you just take your seat, please?
Chairperson, is the member prepared to take a question?
Honourable Member, are you prepared to take a question?
Not at the moment, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Yeah. All Mr. Bagram has done is to remind us that talk is cheap and that it is not subject to value-added tax. It is not surprising the DA still wants to perpetuate the apartheid low-wage regime that has reproduced the working poor for decades. Perhaps you need to be reminded that many black workers spent years in prisons, suffered state-sponsored brutality and others, paid the ultimate price for challenging the repressive apartheid labor market policies. Most workers today consider the post-apartheid labor market dispensation as their revolutionary victory. Of course, the DA want more exemptions because they want as possible workers to earn less than 20 rand per hour. Shame on you, DA. They also want new entrants to earn less than 20 rand per hour. I'm still saying shame on you. Ke a leboga.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now call on the Honourable Minister of Labour to respond to the debate.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Honorable House Chair, firstly, let me thank all the members who supported our budget and who made the contributions that will assist us as the Department of Labour. I just want to say to Honorable Dudley, of course, we are going to have road shows. We have already started through the LP and IR branch, and also IES and CCMA has started the road shows in training the members in terms of the legislation that we have. And I know that the IES budget, inspection and enforcement, has been reduced. There were reasons that were given by the Treasury to do so, and precisely because they didn't give us the funding for the tools of trade of the inspectors. That's why we have said to them, we need to get more funding in that particular area. And I'm happy that the members will assist us in order for the Treasury probably to increase our budget. Honorable members, particularly the former comrade, Umadisha. The World Economic Forum, yes, have said we have dropped from 28 to 61 and the World Bank to 82. And maybe what we have to look at is what are the reasons for that. And I must say, honorable members, as the African National Congress, we will never allow a clause in our own laws that will say the employers must hire and fire the workers without giving the reasons. And they rather reduce us to those numbers rather than to exploit our workers in this country. We have suffered before 1994, and we're not going to allow the workers to go back to those dates where we really suffered. An honorable member from FF+, I don't think that you have to compare what was happening before 1994 and currently. Because if you are very aware, you must be very familiar with what was done previously. I do believe that you know history, probably your forefathers told you how they were doing it. Imsebenzi yayireservelwa abantu abamhlophe, not abantu abamnyama, were not even recognized as workers, particularly the farm workers and domestic workers, even those who were working in the mines. They were not recognized as workers. So after 1994, those people were recognized. And probably that is why now you are complaining, let me not say that. Because one, you are complaining really like a child, uma ikhalela ubis, fanege incele kunina. And you forget that some of you look so handsome precisely because of the domestic workers. And the question, how are you paying those domestic workers? Do you really recognize them as workers or you don't? So those are the issues that you have to grapple, Honorable members, I'm not going to listen to those who always make noise because you see, Isisho City, an empty can always make noise. And therefore, I think we have to take care of the members of this house, particularly Honorable House Chair. I think we need to give some time for the members ukuthi sibenzele i-workshop about the labor laws of this country because it is clear that some of the members don't understand what the laws are saying. The honorable member from EFF, when you are talking about the labor broking, you must also look at Labor Relations Act Section 189 of what it says. And if you don't understand it, we are ready as the department to take you through the Labor Relations Act and the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, including the Employment Equity Act, when it talks about the equal pay for the work of the equal value. There is no need in this country to pay somebody less because it's either that person is a male or a female. It is there in the Employment Equity Act. And that is why we have even said we are going to review Section 53 of the Employment Equity Act in order to enforce those companies that are not complying with that particular law so that they will never get the work from the government. Honorable Imam Sheikh, the reason why we're unable to implement the national minimum wage on the 1st of May is because the legislation has not been finalized. And now it's up to the members of this House and also the members of the NSOP to finalize that legislation. And therefore, after that, the President will promulgate for the implementation of the law. Let me turn to Honorable Bahrain. Honorable Bahrain and Honorable De America. I thought you always attend the portfolio committee, but it's clear that even when you attend, you don't understand what is being presented to the committee. The reason why I'm saying this, you pretend as if you are governing very well here in the Western Cape, but you are implementing the EPW program and you take the forms from the Department of Labor to say those who are work seekers, you are going to employ them and you register those people as if you are employing them while you are not doing that. So you must be honest with yourself before you are honest with the public. And secondly, you don't even understand who contributes to the UIF and compensation. The UIF and compensation is contributed by the employees and the employers. They are not, the money is not taken from the fiscals or from the taxpayers, but the workers are contributing themselves. And also we don't have the powers to prosecute as the Department of Labor when it comes to the corruption cases. That's why we refer those cases to the relevant institutions. Therefore, I just want to tell you, Honorable Member, that it's very amazing because when you are in the portfolio committee, you don't say things that you are saying here. And it's worse, I was there, and you even said you love me. So
Honorable Minister,
it means, therefore, that love
your time
is
is
an
now
unconditional
expired.
love. You don't have such love. So, honorable members, thank you very much for supporting this budget vote, and I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, order. Members are reminded that the debate on trade and industry will take place at 2 o'clock in the National Assembly, and the debate on public works budget vote will take place at 2 in the old Assembly. Order, honorable members. And the debate on international relations and cooperation budget vote will take place also at 2 p.m. in Committee Room E249. That concludes the business for this morning and this mini plenary session, and the mini plenary will now rise. Thank you.